Hi, this is Andy Hoffman of CryptoGoldCentral.com, the sound money blog of the 21st century, in which I write daily of my vision of the future of money, in which Bitcoin is the center of the universe. Try my free 7-day trial membership and contact me at ahoffman@CryptoGoldCentral.com to arrange cryptocurrency or precious metal consultations. Today, I'm honored to yet again have my close friend Mike Krieger as my guest, a timely appearance ahead of next Wednesday's epic meetup event in Denver, featuring myself, Michael, Adam Meister, Vortex, Thomas Hunt, and Jack Mallers, which you can purchase tickets for by going to the Boulder Blockchain or Rocky Mountain Blockchain websites. Like myself, Mike is a New Yorker who started his career as a sell-side energy analyst on Wall Street, myself at Solomon Smith Barney and Mike at Lehman Brothers. Both of us left Wall Street and New York a decade ago to come to Colorado and pursue more rewarding careers and lifestyles. Through his libertyblitzkrieg.com website, Mike has become one of the most influential content creators in the alternative media, featuring commentary on finance, politics, social justice, and of course, Bitcoin, as not only is he an early adopter, wearing a vintage Bitcoin shirt today, but one of the people I attribute to my decision to invest in it way back when. His @LibertyBlitz Twitter feed is must-read material, and he's a regular contributor to Zero Hedge, as well as a regular guest on Max Kaiser's podcasts. To that end, Mike, welcome to One-on-One.
Hey, Andy, it's great to be on with you again. And yeah, I can't wait for next week in Denver. It's going to be a great time. You know, as I think you know, I'm kind of introverted here in my own little world. So I don't go to conferences really at all. I don't really travel much at all. So to be able to meet all these other Bitcoiners is going to be a lot of fun. So it's going to be a great event. And anyone that's around Denver, Boulder should definitely come out. Would love to meet you.
Yeah, it's actually in my prior lifetimes, I did a lot of traveling for mining companies and for working for a bullion dealer and, of course, on Wall Street back then. But I get a lot more done sitting in front of my computer here. And it's rare that you get an opportunity to meet up with so many different people in the Bitcoin community. And that will be what's going on Wednesday, the 25th, here in Denver. So, okay, of course, we're going to start with the sea change that we've seen in the cryptocurrency markets since the Big Bang, as I'm calling it, on April 12th, when at a time of maximum negative sentiment, technical analysis FUD, and mainstream media and Wall Street calls for the death of Bitcoin, ironically, at the horrible price of $6,800, seemingly out of the blue, the price rocketed up $1,400 in minutes in the highest volume hour in Bitcoin trading history. Subsequent efforts to take the price back down, including a single whale dumping 6,500 Bitcoin on the market earlier this week, failed to push the price below 8,000. And then the deluge began of capital rushing back in, as evidenced by the January-like explosion of altcoins, in the process taking Bitcoin market dominance from above 45% barely a week ago to closer to 38 or 39% today. Frankly, it's comical that anyone can be bearish, in my view, as the sector's resurgence is no less powerful than what we saw 4 months ago, at a time when the global political, social, and most of all, monetary landscape has never begged for change as today. That said, the TA fudsters, and one in particular has lured so many into losing money while scaring them away from perhaps the best investment opportunity of all time, continue to fixate on charts that have no meaning in the tiny, dynamic cryptocurrency market, particularly because, per the title of my audio blog earlier this week, when the primary trend changes, in this case from bear to bull, sell the rally strategies no longer work, replaced by buy the dip. No one knows exactly how things will ultimately play out, but given Bitcoin's historically bullish fundamentals and chump change valuation relative to the increasingly toxic and overvalued legacy financial markets, it's patently obvious to me, per the title of last week's audio blog, that the crypto bear market is over. To that end, Mike, tell us your views of the current state of the Bitcoin and altcoin markets. And if, given the unique backdrop of today's financial markets and monetary system, it's possible that such a powerful, painful bear could possibly end so quickly.
Hey, Andy, thanks. So there's obviously a lot of points you made there, a lot of different topics. So I'm going to try to address a few of them. And if I didn't catch one or two, feel free to repeat them. first I just wanted to talk about that huge rally, which really was pretty impressive. What was it, a week, 2 weeks ago, something like that?
April 12th.
Okay, so April 12th. One of the things is right around that time, and this is what I've been watching very closely, just to gauge near-term, sentiment. I'm not a big Bitcoin trader at all. I'm pretty much a holder. I mean, I will sell from time to time, and for money to pay bills and stuff. But I do watch, the market closely, and I watch margin longs and shorts on Bitfinex, and what you were seeing around that time was this huge increase in shorts, but also a huge increase in shorts relative to longs. I think margin shorts at one point, and don't quote me on the exact number, but I think it was something like 5,000 contracts short above margin longs, which is very unusual. And so the short to long on margin accounts and Bitfinex got so out of whack that the shorts were just ready to be slaughtered. And so this rally was, as so many rallies are in markets, often the case, started by short covering, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean it's necessarily a bull trap. Doesn't mean anything really, but it's an important thing to note. And so that's something that I watch. So if you are trading Bitcoin or that's or you're very interested in short-term price movements, that's what I've been looking at, is the positioning between margin longs and margin shorts on Bitfinex, because it has given me a lot of clues as far as like near-term movements. So that's to address that. I think that was a big factor in the reversal, but it does tell you something. It tells you that the sentiment, right, the bearish sentiment became so bad that people were willing to put that amount of shorts out there. That they were that convinced that the price was about to collapse, and of course it didn't. And then the shorts ran for cover. So that's the first thing. Now on the alts. Now this is the one area of the market that actually worries me a little bit and makes me feel like we may not be out of the woods yet. And it's because I don't like alts doing this well and pumping this well. What it tells me is that there's an element out there still believes that Ripple is like the future. You know what I mean? Like stupid stuff. So there's a lot of stupidity still out there, and a lot of money is chasing stupidity. And again, that's, I prefer that wouldn't be the case. I prefer Bitcoin does well and the alts are kind of dead. I would say that's a better sign that just total sentiment in space is washed out. So I don't know that we're out of the woods yet. But at the same time, you don't like panic low, sell at 6,000, out of fear either. So that's just a point on that. And then finally, and this is the most important thing I want to say today, is that I think this is great, honestly. I think that the consolidation phase and the chilling out of the hyping and focusing on the price is a very excellent thing for Bitcoin. And the reason I'm saying this is, again, as you mentioned, as someone that's been in this space, I've been through brutal bear markets before. I mean, I was as I've been in Bitcoin since 2012, so I've seen this movie before. It's brutal. But here's the good thing. Look how Bitcoin came out of that last bear market, stronger than ever, right? With more of a community than ever. Right? It's just a digestion period. People don't need to get all bent out of shape and need the moon tomorrow. That's not how these things work. And furthermore, because so many people in my extended friends and family network knew that I'd been in Bitcoin and a supporter of it for so many years, you know how many people were coming out of the woodwork in late 2017 to me? I mean, telling me, how do I buy it? Should I buy? You know what I'm talking about? People that do not know about Bitcoin, don't care about decentralization or voluntary action or open source code or any of the core fundamentals of Bitcoin that are paradigm changing for our species. That's not good. That's not good. So we need to look at this period as a time where we focus on what matters. And what matters is not the price at any given moment, but what's going on with the community, what's going on with the protocol, like Lightning, as you know, it's a huge deal. So I think it's great that all this great stuff's happening under the surface. The Bitcoin community is as passionate as ever before, and the price is just down. It's so what? Again, like I say, I think people need to focus on what's important, and what's important is Bitcoin, not the price right now.
Right, and of course, it's funny you're saying, quote, the price is down. The first time the price hit $8,500 was only about 6 months ago.
Right. And you know what it was a year ago? You know what a year ago today?
1,000 or less.
1,200. Yeah. So, but it's exactly perspective. People.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, it's really only down for the people that came in late. But we're you address so many different things here. First of all, again, when you talk about that low at 6,000, I've been saying from day one, I said it back in September and October, once we get to 6,000, which is a $100 billion market cap, that's when Bitcoin becomes investable to pretty much every institution in the world. They have minimum thresholds that high for the biggest institutions. And that's where they came in. And that's where we saw the wall of money come in, because it hit 100 billion just before New Year's. And of course, all the money came rushing in at New Year's. And when it fell, it's not a coincidence that's where it stopped, because that's where the institutional put is. And guess what? You know, it hasn't even come close to that 6,000 level again, because in my view, the institutions are just going to keep sitting there, and eventually they rose their bid. And when you talk about telltale signs, again, you know, so many people, you know, obviously we'll talk about more of this later. They see my Twitter feed talking about technical analysis. Sentiment is so weak that no one is out there talking about fundamentals anymore. The fundamentals are ragingly bullish. When you talk about Lightning Network and the network effect, the hash rate is exploding. There's no competition anymore from any of the other altcoins. And yet everyone's looking at these things in isolation. And like you said, record short positions. What happens to markets when they have record short positions? How about the Mayer multiple? The Mayer multiple is basically the price divided by 200-day moving average, trading at almost a record low for Bitcoin maybe a week or two ago at like 0.8. It's like, you know, 90-something% of the time it was higher at a time when nothing's wrong with Bitcoin. These are the telltale signs of when a market is sold out. And so when people want to talk about tax selling being an issue, which is ridiculous, no, it's not tax selling. It's exactly what Mike was talking about. It was sold out at levels above $6,000, and that's how we got to where we are now. We have all these things that you brought up here. Let's go back into altcoins. Again, people know that I am a Bitcoin maximalist per se, although I look forward to my B-Rhodium, and I look forward to selling my other crypto dividends when they are worth something. Mike is not quite 100% maximalist like I am, but he's closer to that end than the other end of the range. So Mike, tell me, I mean, first we'll get back to what you said in a second about the sector, you know, price movement. But what do you think of the altcoins in general? I mean, do you think that there are altcoins that can survive and thrive, or is it truly a Bitcoin maximalist environment in the end game?
Right. So this is such a huge topic, and really one I haven't talked about. So it's a good question. All right. First of all, as I think you know, I've written like a million pieces about this. I don't label myself, right? So I'm not going to label myself a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm not going to label myself a leftist or a rightist or a neoconservative or a libertarian. I don't do that. I just don't do labels for so many reasons that I've written about. But moving on, that said, you know, you should look at what someone's actions are. And over the years, you know, I don't think I've written a single post about Ethereum. You know what I mean? I think I wrote one post about Ripple in 2013. I don't write about other coins. I write about Bitcoin every single time. And the reason I do that is because I think Bitcoin is so much bigger than what people pigeonhole it into. It's like this currency. The principles of Bitcoin, in my opinion, are the principles that we human beings should study, examine, and apply to everything in life, because they are principles of freedom and voluntarism and openness. So hugely important. And as a lot of people point out, and which was obvious to me from day one, the fact that there's no leader, the fact that it was an anonymous leader, that's the huge advantage that Bitcoin has over all these other coins. And so when people point this out, and I completely agree, when you have someone that's a public figure or a team of people behind a project, that doesn't mean the project is bad, but it does mean it can't compete with Bitcoin. So as far as like, is there anything out there that can compete with Bitcoin in what Bitcoin is trying to do? I don't see it, because every other thing I see has some sort of a team behind it or a guy or whatever. And here's the thing, no matter who you are, how tough you are, whatever it is, if you're a person, you're a centralized point of failure, period. If you're a team that's running a currency, and you are a target then. And there's no one person to target in Bitcoin. You just can't do it. And we saw last year how VCs and miners tried to essentially take over Bitcoin and put it in the direction they want to. And the people, right, the grassroots the voices, the loud people you never heard of, some of these people stopped it. I mean, actually stopped it. So that's incredible. And I can't imagine any other coin working quite like that. So no, I mean, I'm totally focused on Bitcoin, but look, I have been from the beginning. And the more and more I think about it, particularly because I believe that you're going to have a real battle, right? As states start to lose their authority and power in the next 7 years or so between nation states and people who just kind of want to be free. It's going to be even more and more intense. And you need to be very strategic thinking in that sort of thing. And the way Bitcoin is structured allows you to be much more anti-fragile than these other projects. So Bitcoin is political. I mean, anyone who tells you Bitcoin's not political doesn't understand Bitcoin or wants to make it not political by making changes. But it's inherently a political thing and a very important one.
Right. And the way you're exactly right. The way that I've always looked at alts in general is, I wrote this article a few weeks ago called Cryptocurrencies versus Securities. And I don't even like the term cryptocurrencies because to me, the only one that really warrants that name currency is Bitcoin, which isn't even being used as a currency, but could one day. The rest to me are securities. They're unregistered, unregulated, Wild West securities, but that's what they are because unless you have something that can actually compete with Bitcoin, I'm talking about a unsubsumable application, you are just a security looking to try to get investors to believe that there's something of value to be speculated on. Because, when you talk about, for instance, privacy coins, for the most part, privacy coins are a subsumable application that one day Bitcoin will do all of that. And the same goes for smart contracts and all that stuff. So it doesn't mean that you can't make money in Ethereum in, quote, issuing it or buying it. But the fact is, over the long term, unless you have something truly unique, which is very difficult when you're going up against this behemoth, as you're talking about Bitcoin, which really is a political being, it's everything to everyone, it's going to be very hard. The other part of altcoins, and what I say is that the next rally coming up is going to be the one about price adoption, not speculation. We're still in the price speculation phase. That's all anyone cares about. But eventually they're going to be thinking about your principles, especially if there's any kind of political or economic crisis around. Now, the other thing I want to discuss with you about the alts, given that you, like myself, are from Wall Street, we've talked about this before, is, look, if you're going to be a crypto hedge fund, and there are hundreds of them came out, and they started the bubble in the beginning of the year, you have to diversify, right? I mean, you have a 2 and 20 payout. You can't just buy Bitcoin. You have to create alpha, meaning you have to do better than Bitcoin. So what happens? People buy all the altcoins, and most of them are very illiquid. I mean, is it any more less complex than that? What's going on in the altcoin sector?
Yeah, look, that's a great point, and actually one I wanted to address when you brought it up earlier. So let's sort of dig down into the statement wall of institutional money, because I think it's important to differentiate between that. Okay. So yes, we had a ton of hedge fund launches last year. And so therefore we had a good amount of money that came into the cryptocurrency sector that wasn't there before. Absolutely true. But here's what people aren't understanding. BlackRock isn't buying Bitcoin yet. Wellington Management isn't buying Bitcoin yet. Fidelity, even though they really love it, I don't think they're putting Bitcoin in their funds yet. Right?
They're mining it, but they're not buying it for funds.
Right. So they're not actually going out into the market and buying it. Okay, so that's hugely important because that's big money, okay? These hedge funds, as I think you know, thousands of them all over the place. They pop up, they pop down. Some of them might have $5 million to invest, $10 million, right? These aren't massive funds. And so, but you're right, those type of funds in particular are going to be more Wild West kind of investors. And they're going to go in there, you're right, and say, oh, let me pump this coin, let me pump that coin, right, and generate these crazy returns. And they screwed up the market, actually, in a lot of ways, because they had put this money in that shouldn't have been in certain coins, and then they caused all these dislocations, and now a lot of them have shut down. I saw an article, I can't remember the number, but a whole bunch of crypto hedge funds have shut down this year. So that kind of money has entered. The kind of money that has yet to enter, all right, and that's the big boys, hasn't dipped a toe in yet. I mean, yeah, you got Bill Miller and Novogratz, right? But those are such early kind of adopter.
Novogratz hasn't even started his fund yet.
It was fun, but right, personal.
Yes.
And he did it at Fortress when he was at Fortress. Mm-hmm. But the point is, these are guys that have like reputations and a lot of money, and so they're not worried, right? The big institutions at an institutional level have not come in yet. And yes, I do believe that going forward, as Bitcoin continues to demonstrate its attributes and what it can do for the world and how different and mind-blowing it is, plus with Lightning Network continuing to grow, that's when eventually you're going to start to see the real big money start to put their toe in, and that's when you're going to have the thing. And and moving beyond that, those aren't hedge funds, right? So like, let's say it's Wellington Management or something. It ends up being like, we'll take a 2% stake in Bitcoin in our tech fund or something like that. Let's say they did that. They're not going to buy a cryptocurrency with 50 million market cap or 100 million market cap. They're not going to touch that stuff. They would only touch something like Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, hopefully not Ripple.
Well, again, Mike, that's exactly what I'm saying. They have a threshold.
Right.
Wellington Management has a threshold. Mike Krieger's hedge fund does not, but Wellington does.
And it's the Mike Krieger, even though I don't have a hedge fund, it's the Mike Krieger type hedge funds that are the ones that got into crypto, not the big money. That has not happened. So people need to understand institutional money at a real level, right? I mean, we both know what we're talking about at that level, has not touched cryptos yet, as far as I can see.
Right. Although I would say that there's undoubtedly some of that big money, be it in the form of billionaires or the people who run those funds that have. Yes. And maybe even, look, I've speculated that the Bank of Japan, given all that they've said and done, may well have been a buyer, and they may well have been a buyer at the lows. We just don't know that yet. But my guess is that while it hasn't been sanctioned yet for much of the big institutional money, there's no doubt that big institutions in some way, shape, or form have put their toe in the water. We just don't know how much yet. And again, when the next rally comes around, when they see after we had this big correction, which only lasted 3 or 4 months, and we start moving up again, and they realize, you know what, this is not like some flaky fly-by-night thing. It's real. And Bitcoin held its $100 billion market cap. And again, if this is what you talk about, and we'll get to in a second, the political and social situation that's ongoing in the world, you're going to see those institutions come in en masse.
Yeah, personally for me, I actually don't agree in the sense that I don't think any big institution has bought Bitcoin. That's my personal, nobody knows, but that's my personal view. But as you were saying, as far as them eventually coming in, I think that Lightning is the key, because I just know how these people think. And right now they're just like, oh, well, it's just this like nerdy currency, it's drug deal. If Lightning, grows out and it starts to touch people on a daily basis through applications on the second layer, where it's actually adding significant utility. I sent a tweet out yesterday, and I really believe this, where I said Twitter should implement a feature where you can say, okay, I'm only responding to DMs, direct messages for Bitcoin if you send me one, right? Something like that. There's so many ways you can integrate this stuff into social media as it stands for content creators to get paid in that kind of a manner. I know Earn is doing a similar thing with email, but why not with Twitter direct messages? There's so many opportunities. The point is, if Bitcoin starts to be utilized in a manner like that, where it creates a game-changing sort of a thing that's affecting people's lives positively, then the institutional managers are going to see that and say, oh, okay, look at this. This is starting to really impact the real world in a revolutionary way. Even though it already is, they can't see that yet. So Lightning is just so huge and important. And that's why I was saying what I said at the beginning. Focus on growing this thing. Focus on making it better and more and adding more utility. And that's what people on the second layer are trying to do. It's great.
And the funny thing is that Lightning, people kind of associate Lightning as like, okay, we have segments, so now we can do Lightning. But Lightning is just one of many second layer applications that will make Bitcoin faster and cheaper and more private and more useful and all those things. And we just started. I mean, we just got SegWit 6 months ago or so, and already a lot of these things are starting to be implemented. But again, Lightning is just the tip of the iceberg. And yeah, I mean, I had Francis Pouliot on my show last week. I mean, honestly, I would rank Francis, who's a pretty young guy, as one of the smartest Bitcoiners in the world. He works in mining, he works in payment systems, in consulting, in wallets. He knows pretty much everything. He consults with governments about building mining farms in Canada. And he was saying that within his consulting operation, that through this downturn, they have not seen a downturn at all in demand for transactional usage or how to implement transactional usage. And the biggest thing he said was that he's getting tons of corporate clients asking him about Lightning as they're interested in using it. And it really is remarkable, because there's going to be, that Netscape moment at some point that kind of you're referring to, when the world realizes, wow, this will be used not just for speculation and or store of wealth, there's a fine line between the two, but for actual things that are much more efficient than what we currently have.
And things we can't even imagine, right? I mean, that's the point, right? And that's what Bitcoin allows. It allows all of a sudden, 5 years from now, people might say, wow, I didn't think Bitcoin, that's where Bitcoin was going to go. And we might be really amazed. So yeah, exactly. But look, for those of us who have been around for a while and the early, you had that moment, right, where you were like, oh wow, right? It just hits you like a ton of bricks. I remember when it hit it for me, and then you can't stop thinking about it for months. You go to bed thinking about Bitcoin. Yeah, it's weird, but we all had those moments, and that's when you really get it. And once you do get it, there's no turning back, right? It's a red pill on another level. It's like a consciousness red pill.
Right. Well, look, you and I both at different points in our past had that with gold. I probably had it earlier because I'm older, but there was many years that I thought that way until, of course, Bitcoin came around, in which case, and people know me, I was the ultimate gold bull. I've sold all my gold and I couldn't care less about it. I think it's archaic when I look at compared to what Bitcoin can do. And again, you're talking about, we'll look up a few years from now and say, well, wow, look what it can do. Well, I'm just thinking about where we were in Bitcoin, a year and a half ago. There was no such thing as an online wallet. I guess they came around in 2016 or so. But if when I first bought Bitcoin, there was no such thing as a Trezor. The scaling debate was something that was never going to end. Lightning Network was a dream, all these things, and they're all happening right now. And we just have had SegWit for a few months. And
here's the thing, I want to mention this as well. The most important thing, and this is what I noticed very early on, which is a lot of the reasons why I got invested in it and involved, besides just the principles, is that I noticed, because I went to these Bitcoin conferences in 2013, and I just looked around and I was like, whoa, this is some of the smartest people I've ever been around in my life. And it's only gotten smarter, Like I look around and I see all these people that I didn't even, they weren't even talking about Bitcoin 3 years ago. And I'm like, wow, these people are great. These so smart. And this is what we should encourage. We should encourage the smartest people. And then there's like Jack, right, who's going to be hopefully going to be at our conference next week, our panel next week, who's this young kid, and look at what he's adding, right? This has been my whole point in my blog from the beginning. It's like, I'm like kind of smart, but I know there's people that are way smarter than I am. And if I can use my communication skills to inspire people to say, the system we have right now is crap, it's garbage, it's controllable, centralized, bureaucratic oppression, smartest people in the world out there, please understand this, and then go use your talents to make the world a better place. And a lot of those people are going to Bitcoin, and that's great. And you know what? No governments, nobody can stop the smartest people in the world working on this project. And so that's what we need to continue. Forget the price. Freaking get the smartest people involved in Bitcoin. Quit Google, quit Facebook, quit all these companies if you can, and work to help humanity instead.
Right. And of course, it's not just smart. The key, as you're saying, is young, because this is a generational thing. This is a generation that grew up on computers. It's a generation that grew up watching financial repression in the form of central banks pretty much commandeering our lives. The whole getting off the gold standard occurred, right after I was born. And it was a process that took 40 years of ruining money and watching the 1% take it all. Right. And a lot of people in our generation have had trouble fighting against the debt and the inflation it caused. But most of it have basically gotten through it. But the millennials, the Gen Zs, completely different world. They are getting the brunt of this, and they are fighting back, and they have skills and tools and motivations that people that are older than them, getting older and less motivated, have. And so that's what's the most exciting thing, because when you talk about all these smart people, they are really young. It's really amazing when I see the names of these developers, some of the more famous developers. And I'm trying to think of who the guy I saw, he was on one of Vortex's show. And I think of him like he's probably like an old man with a gray beard, and he's like 25 years old, because these people are smart and young.
Right. And so this is really important. I talk about this sometimes as well, just being like a father, being a father, and, seeing being a parent is a huge responsibility and an honor as well. But I take it very seriously from another perspective, in that this changing the world on the level we want to change it, right, ain't going to happen tomorrow, right? It can happen faster than we think, but the key, the most important thing is the future generations. And so if I can sort of inspire, through my lifestyle and teachings and stuff, my kids to be critical thinkers with their own mind, that's the best gift I can probably give at this point. And so, yeah, it's very important. The generational thing is just absolutely huge. You know, take a young kid and like talk to them, you know, like, you know, get them excited, not to inject themselves in the parasitic economy we have today and try to take as much as they can. But hey, you're going to be on this planet for a long time. So, you know, do your best to make this planet better than how you came and got it. And this is the thing, you know, a lot of people, and this is the attitude for a lot of generations, including mine, you know, I guess I'm a late Gen X. It's just pure selfishness. You know, so many people just have this attitude of, I'm just going to go get mine. You know, and look, for a lot of people just are surviving. But there are plenty of people out there that have resources and smarts and don't need to be just chasing another dollar and can actually focus some of their energies on doing some decent work out there to make this planet a little bit better. So I hope, you know, I hope people make that choice if possible.
Well, at the same time, what Gordon Gekko said, greed is good, is the ultimate in capitalism, and he is right. Greed is good. It's not good when it's used for corruption and to take from others. But by going into the cryptocurrency space, not only are you, as you say, helping humanity, which of course you are, because you're taking out of the hands the power that has suppressed and repressed generations. But that's where you're going to make the money, whether you're investing in the crypto sector or investing yourself in it in your career. That's where the money is going to be made, and it's not just in coding. I mean, again, you and I, we're kind of strange. We're like straddling the older generations that don't care and the younger generations that are very into it. And our skills are knowledge of financial markets and communications. And there's going to be plenty more demand for things that are not, you know, hardcore technical, but things like communications and financial aspects. And if you go into this space realizing that there's so much upside financially and philosophically, and of course for your family and their descendants, it's really exciting. Now, I just want to go on
real quick. I don't think greed is good, but that's another conversation.
Well, there's different kinds of greed.
Well, I would just say that there's a difference between what we did, right? You see an opportunity and how the world is changing. You say, I'm going to invest in that opportunity. Plus, it aligns with my philosophy. You know, I mean, if I saw like the Bitcoin of the military-industrial complex, and it was essentially like, oh, well, you know, if you buy this and we have World War III, you're going to make a ton of money, right? I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't support it, right? I mean, Bitcoin aligned with my philosophical viewpoint on where I think we need to head as a species. And plus, there was a financial opportunity. I guess my point is, there's no reason. I think this is a myth. There's this myth that like to do well financially, you need to be kind of a scumbag. And that's just not true. And Bitcoin proved it's not true, because the people that took a punt on Bitcoin in the very early days was the highest risk thing you could do. And those people did it because they believed in Bitcoin, not because they were like, I'm going to be multimillionaires. And guess what? For doing for supporting something that really is a good thing for our species and buying a bunch of it early because they believed in it, now they're multimillionaires, right? So you don't have to be, I guess, you know, greed has these negative connotations to the word. And I think, you know, we could find better words, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I think the word I'm using is opportunity, because you know, I thought the same way about gold. I put my heart and soul and investments into it. I thought that I was helping people as well as my own personal financial situation. There were mixed results there, and a big reason why there were mixed results was because Bitcoin came along. And fortunately, I have moved on to this space because nothing is going to usurp Bitcoin during our lifetimes that I can imagine. So yes, it's an opportunity. It's not being bad. It's trying to do well for yourself and at the same time doing well for others. Now, let's discuss the biggest question, maybe a little less so today than it's been in recent weeks, but the biggest question on Bitcoin holders and potential Bitcoin investors' minds, which is, in bull and bear markets alike, what could go wrong? Now, for grizzled veterans like Mike and myself, this is a far less scary question, given how much better a grasp we have on the fundamentals and the history in watching Bitcoin grow and respond to threats. Conversely, new investors are typically blown away by the price volatility, which in altcoins is even greater, and terrified by the fact that this brand new incredibly complex asset class often trades enigmatically, seemingly one black swan event from oblivion. From my perspective, Bitcoin's risk reward has never been more positive, given its historically low valuation as measured by the Mayer multiple, and fundamentals that, in my view, have never been more bullish, to the point that I never anymore wake up worried about the future or even the near term. Mike, from your perspective, what does Bitcoin's current risk reward ratio compare to it, like compared to the past? And if it's unfavorable, what factors cause you to worry about its valuation, adoption, or growth?
Okay, sure. So a few things. First of all, and I've learned this the hard way myself. You know, I've taken huge positions and stuff, not Bitcoin related, and got blown up. You know, I know how it is. you
like what? Like what? What did you get blown up in?
Well, like precious metals miners, for example.
Well, that's the thing that blew me up many times.
Okay, so right, blowing a lot of people up. But the point is, look, you get blown up. That's part of being a human. If you're trading markets and you're going to be a successful trader or investor, you're going to get blown up. And if you haven't been blown up, get ready, because it's coming, right? I mean, that's just what happens. And so from being blown up, you learn lessons, and therefore you are less likely to be blown up in the future. So for me, number one, you should never go to bed freaking out about your investments, period. If you are, you're too big, so you get smaller, okay? That's number one. Bitcoin is less sort of binary than it was before. The risk of it going to zero is way less than it was in the early days. And then the upside is also less. I mean, it's just totally, so there's less risk, there's probably less reward, although there's still tons of reward in my view. But it's different than it was in 2012, 2013. So that's number one. So you can go into the investment knowing that. But the key thing is this. And this is what I told every single person that asked me about Bitcoin late last year, right? That haven't said anything since. I said, learn about it first, right? See what the principles of Bitcoin are. See how it works. See what it's trying to do. Understand the origins of it. If you still are interested, buy some. And then you won't care if the price goes down. And that's the thing. If you know about Bitcoin and you realize the world-changing potential of Bitcoin, you're going to want to put some money in it, and you will then not care so much. You can be a good hodler. You won't care so much about if the price goes down in the near term, because you see what the potential is, and the potential is huge. It's still huge, right? Lightning didn't even exist when I first got into this, and now I see that, and I'm like, wow, this is incredible, a whole nother phase of potential. But I think the key thing is this: make sure your position size is appropriate. Again, if you're really young and you want to just you just want to take half your money and throw it in there, I mean, that's what young people do sometimes, and it might work out for you. But if you're older, you're closer to our age, you have a wife, you have kids and stuff, don't be stupid, right? I mean, you don't have to put all your money in it. But yeah, I mean, if you believe in Bitcoin, you should own Bitcoin. But don't go to bed worried that the price is going to go down 20%, because guess what? You could wake up and the price could go down 20% any single day. Right? It could also go up 20% any single day. That's the kind of asset this is. So just don't be stupid is my support. I tweeted this yesterday, right? So it was something like, what did I say? I said, use it, support it, fight for it, and then let the chips fall where they may. Don't worry about stuff you can't control. You can't control what the chart's going to do. What you can control is your position size and your understanding of Bitcoin and your passion for Bitcoin. That's it.
Right. And of course, you're talking about traditional investment principles of diversification and the amount of size of your positions. But for some people like myself, I've never done that. I've always been kind of like the Richard Russell. I'm not sure how many people who are listening know he is. He just died close to 100 years old. But he would talk about identifying the primary trend. And I did a podcast just about this, a crypto audio blog, just 2 or 3 days ago. And if you can identify the primary trend and invest heavily in it, that's your best chance of winning, not trading, buying and holding. Now, of course, like you said, that definitely gives you higher than average risk if something goes wrong. But my whole point is that way back when I was 100% invested in precious metal miners, which gave me some of the biggest gains and losses of my career. Likewise, for many years, I was 100% invested in precious metal bullion. and right now 100% invested in Bitcoin. I mean, that's how I feel. And my point is, when I talk about risk reward profile, yes, of course there's risks, but like you said, to me, there's no risk that it goes to zero.
Right.
And when people talk about $1,300, it's just nauseating, because that's pure FUD. The only way we go to $1,300 is if it's hacked, the SHA-256, and it's at 1,300 on the way to zero.
Right. Look,
yeah.
I just want to jump in. So yeah, I get it. I mean, you're a financial professional, as am I, right? So people need to understand that. You know, we've been in markets our whole lives. We understand markets. We have an emotion. We've been through some pretty bad stuff in other markets, right?
Yes.
Most people aren't like us, man. I mean, that's the thing. So look, me too. I've got what people would probably call an irresponsible percentage in Bitcoin, right? I do as well, but I don't think that's appropriate for other people. I know I'm kind of crazy, as far as things are concerned. And I also want to say this: we're also different in that this is what we're doing, right? We're talking to people, we're communicating with people. For a lot of other people out there, they have jobs, right? They have other careers, they have other things they need to take care of. They may also need the money, So it's like, if someone has such a big position in Bitcoin that during a bear market, every single day they're checking the price and getting depressed and emotionally wrecked, that's not good for them. It's not good for their families. It's not good for whatever other work they're doing. Maybe that work is Bitcoin related. My point is, it's so important to have your head on straight, right? To be calm and not distressed, because I know what it's like to be in markets where you're getting wrecked and you have too big of a position. It's horrible. It's horrible. And I don't think people should put themselves in that position for the most part.
Right. And let me just backtrack a little, because this was all great discussion right here. But I want to go back. You mentioned risk reward versus 2012. And this is, I think, what I'm trying to refer to here. I'm not even talking about your personal financial situation or strategy, which is another topic which you were kind of addressing there, about what a person should do to make sure that they don't put themselves in harm's way. I'm talking about Bitcoin's risk reward as an investment in general, because you were saying that there's less risk than there was at those lower prices. And obviously, look, if you were invested even a year and a half ago, before the whole scaling debate was resolved, you're damn right it was risky, because the whole Bcash thing, the Segwit 2x thing, the UAHF, any of that stuff, according to even the smartest people in Bitcoin, could have destroyed Bitcoin. But it didn't. And that's why they were better than, extraordinary gains for those that invested through it, because it could have happened, but it worked out in the right way. Now, I'm saying, when I say risk reward versus the past, I think that given all that has occurred in Bitcoin, the things we're talking about here, the Lightning Network, the security of the network, the fact that hard forks are no longer ever going to be in question. In fact, there will never be any other competitors as a monetary store of value, as far as I can even imagine, or certainly anyone's going to worry about. So when you think about that, and the fact that the price is 8,000, not 80 or 800, I still think the risk reward is as good as ever seen. Obviously, the percentage gains can never be matched, going from nothing to 8,000. But I think the dollar gains from 8,000 to potentially very, very high numbers like Tim Draper's $250,000 are real.
Right. So, yeah, and let me take that to another point, which is, I think, going to be right in your wheelhouse. And I think even more important to mention to people, if you compare, and you should do this, because that's what big money is going to do eventually, and it's what family offices are going to do, and it's what high net worth individuals are going to do, particularly as the economy rolls over, probably within the next 12 months. I mean, I think we're in the 9th inning of this economic cycle at this point.
Yeah, I mean, look at interest rates pushing 3% again. Not good.
All the signs are there. I mean, Blankfein the other day was talking about like central banks like owning all the assets. I mean, he doesn't say stuff like that unless he knows it's almost.
We've been saying this for years, and everyone's mocked us for saying it. And what do you know? Goldman Sachs just admitted what I've been mocked for saying. For
years. They wait until they don't tell the truth until they know it's about to collapse, right? Because they make money while it's being manipulated, which they did. But this is the bigger point. So, if you compare Bitcoin's risk reward to other traditional assets, I think Bitcoin's risk reward is phenomenally better, like not even close. So stocks risk reward at this point, I think, is terrible. I think obviously bonds. Do we even need to talk about that?
Well, Japan, the Bank of Japan literally owns all of their bonds. So who's going to buy it from the Bank of Japan at negative yields?
Right. So you have this situation where, and by the way, I mean, even though I think Bitcoin has way higher reward than gold, I think gold will hit 2,000 this year. I think by the end of the year it'll hit 2,000 because it'll get wrapped up in this whole idea that we're talking about right now, which is all of the other assets, right, in the traditional financial system are being rigged to the upside, right? They're all manipulated into this crazy bubble where your risk reward now is horrible in traditional assets. And the only assets that haven't been manipulated to go higher by centralized authorities and governments that are about to, have their reckoning are things like Bitcoin and gold. So, the only assets that the state or the central banks are not interested in propping up are the assets that you want to own at this point in the cycle. So, yeah, I mean, that's the bigger compare. I think the bigger compare is to what are your alternatives? Cash in the bank, which you should have, by the way, because, we all have bills to pay. Bonds and stocks. I mean, I can't even imagine buying bonds and stocks now. It seems like the craziest thing in the world.
Well, let's see. I'm just trying to think how I should move this conversation, because we're going to get to your latest article in a second about the financial system, in which I was going to talk about gold. So let's keep the gold thing to a separate categorization for a moment. Okay. But what you brought up is, again, I love talking to you because there's so few people left, especially in this sector where there's not a lot of financial types in it, like the Simon Dixons. We talk about stocks and bonds. This is what I've been talking about for years, as you said. And I just tweeted again about it the other day. The stock valuations right now, people aren't even paying attention because people don't really own stocks anymore, the average retail investor. The valuations in the stock market are now above the 2000 dot-com peak. And there's no way that anyone could argue that the outlook or financial situation, competitive state, inflation, all these things are even close to as good as they were back then. Because, as you said, and I've been saying forever, central banks have bought everything up. And when Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs finally comes out and says it, when I've been saying it all along, what do you think QE is, people? And again, you have some central banks that have already admitted the Bank of Japan already owns like 3/4 of all the equity ETFs. The Bank of Switzerland is the largest stockholder of U.S. stocks in the world. And again, so they've taken them up to these ridiculously nosebleed levels. And the same with bonds, which have essentially been commandeered by QE and NERP and ZERP, to the point where I've never seen worse risk-reward profiles in legacy assets. Meanwhile, Bitcoin is a $100 billion market cap in a $300 trillion world of overvalued assets.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. And so this crazy thing, I mean, you say stuff like with the Swiss National Bank, and you're just like, the world is such a farce. I mean, our global financial system is such a complete farce that it's actually incredible. But you know what? And you see this everywhere. And I know this isn't, I'll just mention it briefly, but I don't know if you've been following. But the lies that have been going on and the rush to judgment with the Skripal poisoning and then the supposedly chemical attack in Eastern Ghouta, the way that governments are rushing to judgment and action is so shady and so obvious that it's almost as if politics and central banking and economics, it's all coming out at once. Where I almost feel like this moment's going to happen in the next 2 years where a huge percentage, like what is it, 10th monkey, 100th monkey, I don't even know what, but you know the concept, where like a big percentage of the world's population is going to look around and just say, this is all a fraud. This is all a farce. Like our governments are a farce. Our central banks are a farce. Our financial system is a farce. Our global economy is a farce. And when that happens, you better watch out, because that's what the world is going to change. It's that quote, right? There are decades where nothing happens and then weeks where decades happen. That is what's coming.
Oh, that's a good quote. I mean, well, thankfully, I'm now in Bitcoin, which is the most uncorrelated asset ever. So I don't have to deal with that stuff as much. But if I were still in gold, I would have to read all those zero hedge headlines about all these horrible things. And I of course, look just to see what's going on in the world. But it started with the whole election, with the whole Russians. And it's out of control. All the lies and all the lunacy that's going on in the world's supposed leaders. whether it's monetarily or politically or socially. And like you said, with Bitcoin as a weapon against that, things can change in weeks.
Exactly. They can. They really can. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, look, next, and people, give me a few paragraphs here, especially if you've been following my Twitter feed the last few days. I want to talk about industry-wide sentiment, which, per the lack of demand so far for our Denver meeting, I mean, we still have less than 100 people signed up. That's absolutely incredible. And we have some of the most bright people there, optimistic. It just shows you how low sentiment is right now, especially because the sector has emerged. I mean, we're seeing huge price gains. And right now there's still, you can see it in the Twitter traffic. You can see it at my business. You can see it just about anywhere. People don't care. So in my very strong view, we have changed over to a bull market, and that the next time around, it's going to be about a zeitgeist change, like Mike's talking about. People are going to be more focused on what Bitcoin is and can do, as opposed to what its price is. So I just wanted to know, Mike, how do you see sentiment in your corner of the world? And obviously, you're not just in the Bitcoin world; you're straddling a lot of world. I mean, what's your view of how humanity is looking at markets and the world in general?
Wow, that's a good question. Okay, there's a lot of pieces to that. So I have mixed feelings when it comes to cryptocurrency markets. As I mentioned earlier, the pumping of vaults, as soon as things start going up again relative to Bitcoin, is a worrying sign. I don't think that's good. I think that just shows that there's a lot of stupidity out there still. So that would argue in favor of we're still going to be consolidating for a while, maybe until next year, who knows. But I have no idea. You could be 100% right. I'm not going to tell you I disagree. I just don't know, right? I'm sort of neutral on that, and I don't really care because I'm not selling. I'm not negative on Bitcoin at all, and I know what it represents and what it's about. It's never, as you said, I agree. It's never been more to be excited about. The fundamentals have never been better. So I don't really worry about it. I don't really think about it all that much, to be honest. But on the flip side, when it comes to like the legacy financial system, the denial is never been higher. But here's what people need to understand, because we both worked there. The people that run money, manage money at a really big level, trillions of dollars, like huge funds, they're bought into the system, right? They believe it. Like they want it to survive. They want it to perpetuate. They're not going to start being like, oh, it's all going to collapse and I got to buy gold and Bitcoin. So what's going to happen is, as you mentioned, and I thought it was perfectly said, at some point, it's just gonna all change. It's gonna happen quickly. And so yes, this is why people that worry about the next month or the next week or the next 2 months or 3 months aren't thinking big enough, because we are right now staring at the biggest farce possibly in human history on a global basis. When it comes to finance and global financial system, the biggest joke, the biggest house of cards, the biggest upcoming collapse probably ever. And you're worried about it, what Bitcoin's going to do tomorrow? No, just take the big picture. And that's why intentionally the series I've been writing, it's called The Path to 2025 or The Road to 2025. I intentionally said to 2025 because people need to understand that this is the changes that are coming for our planet are going to be so huge that you have to think of it on a longer term time scale. And if you can't think on a longer term time scale, then don't be involved in here. You know what I mean? Like if you can't, if all you care about is Bitcoin going to 10,000 by June, you're missing the point.
Right. And again, it's financial, make no mistake, people, it's financial engineering that has prolonged the system that Mike is talking about. That's not going to last to 2025. We never would have gotten this far as debt and inflation and concentrated power if it weren't for the creation of derivatives and all kinds of things that have enabled the controlling of markets and prevention of its self-correcting mechanisms that had been in place forever. And again, to me, I own gold as a safeguard against it, but it just wasn't working because they commandeered gold with derivatives as well. So, but now that we have, this decentralized monetary platform, I think we do have the weapons to get by that. So I wanted to go on to your article. Again, people, Mike writes, it's free, libertyblitzkrieg.com. Amazing social, political, economic, monetary commentary. And again, he's talking about his most recent series. It's a multi-part series called The Road to 2025. The latest one is talking about the U.S. dollar-denominated financial system falling apart. And Mike is not necessarily, he's not talking about Armageddon. He's saying what I've been saying all along about how fiat doesn't work, and this particular fiat system really doesn't work, especially when you have decentralized platforms like Bitcoin coming around. And then again, you talk about gold. What's gold's role? I mean, to me, I think gold's role is almost gone. It'll certainly be gone when the older generations pass on their wealth to the younger generations, or maybe I'm wrong. So tell me, what do you think is the most likely way things are going to play out through 2025, and what will gold's role be?
Right. Okay. So here's the thing. A lot of people like to think about this in a way too binary manner. So for example, they'll say, okay, well, the US system is going to fail, right? The US dollar is going to lose its total dominance, reserve currency status, and the yuan is going to take over, right? Or Bitcoin is going to take over, or gold is going to take over. Everyone has this very binary view that it's going to be this or that or the other thing. I actually see, which is why I've been talking about this multipolar world, right? All a multipolar world really means is that right now, and this is why I find it funny where people are like, they're going to try to make a one world government. I mean, we have a one world government, idiots. Like, it's the US empire. Like, the US empire is the one world government. It's been that way for decades. Whatever the US says goes. Whatever the US says at the UN goes. Every state, pretty much, until very recently, is a vassal client state of the United States. What state stands up to the US in any sort of important issue and says, no, we're going to go our own way? No state does that. And they haven't for a long time. And anyone that does gets invaded, right? So we have a one world government. We have had one, and it's called the US empire. Okay, that's number one. And the US empire is one of its primary forces is the US dollar. Of course, the military, but the military is supported by US dollar dominance. So what I see in the future is just by multipolar world, all that means is that there are rival states out there, China and Russia in particular, who have the economic and military power to exert their own spheres of influence in their geographical locations. That's all, right? It's not talking about China is going to be the world empire. I don't think that. I think we're going to have a multipolar world where the US does not call the shots on every single thing globally. Okay, so that's number one. So number two, you can't have a multipolar world geopolitically without a multipolar currency world. It's impossible, because if the USD is still dominating to the extent that it does now the global financial system, then Russia and China will always be these kind of peon states. So Russia and China are going to need to make competing nation-state currencies more important on the global stage, which has been happening forever. You know this as a gold guy, right? I mean, people have been writing about it forever. But things really are happening down on the ground. This is where I think gold is going to play a role. Now, you know as well as anybody that China and Russia have been buying a lot of gold. Why are they buying a lot of gold? Not because I think that China is going to make the yuan the global reserve currency. I don't think so. I think what China and Russia are going to do is leverage their gold position to make their currencies more powerful on the global stage. I don't think we're going to be trading in yuan for everything. But I do think that in certain areas, let's say Belt and Road areas, Chinese, Asia Pacific areas, the yuan will play a big role. But I think that's where gold comes into play. They're buying it so that they can then use their gold position as leverage to make sure their currencies are more important. Here's the interesting thing, though. Cryptocurrencies aren't going away, right? Bitcoin's not going away in this environment. So you're going to have an environment by 2025, I think, where you have multiple powerful nation-state currencies plus free market currencies. And it's going to be sort of this haphazard environment, but they're all going to be doing different things for different purposes. And that's sort of the environment I see. I see a sort of a multi-currency environment, but you'll have a layer of nation-state currencies, and then you'll have free market currencies.
Okay. Wow. Well, I mean, it's all amazing. So here are my comments on it. One, I agree completely. The whole thing when people say the dollar is going to collapse, I always laugh at that. No, the dollar is not the issue. It's fiat currency that's the issue. Now, yes, there are many, I call it the totem pole. The third world currencies, many of them already have collapsed. Venezuela is a perfect example. And as inflation and money printing increases, a lot of those fiat currencies are going to become, let's call it, worth less as opposed to worthless. But they're not all going to go away. But the concept of fiat currency as the leader, undisputed leader of money, is going to go away. And that's going to be care of cryptocurrency. And if you're right, gold. I mean, let's face it, people, with gold, I mean, I'm guessing that almost no one listening to this knows much about gold at all, because people just don't care about it if you're young. And most of the older people that I dealt with still don't know much about gold after all these years. The way I see it, the only buyers in the world now are China and Russia. I mean, if you look at like US mint sales of gold and silver eagles, I mean, Mike, I mean, they're literally down to like zero. It's almost as if the business doesn't even exist anymore. And yet the price has been sustained, you know, basically right at the cost of production. If anyone wonders why the price of gold sits around 1,300 and silver at 1,700, I mean, that's the cost of production, and production is not going up. But the only real buyers in the world right now are China and Russia. And I agree completely that if you are just printing yuan and rubles, why not buy gold with it? I mean, it's certainly worth more than your yuan and rubles. And you know that, like you said, that you certainly will be able to exert more leverage with gold than with yuan and rubles. I just think that as a store of value for the average person, especially the younger generations, they're going to want nothing to do with gold. I think silver is completely dead, and gold will last longer, but it will never have the kind of upside that it once did. That's just how I view it. And the other thing is, absolutely, I mean, we're already in a multipolar-ish change. We're not where you're talking about, where it's really dominant and obvious. But look, the US is 4% of the world's population, and the rest of the world doesn't cower in front of it anymore. And especially the Bitcoin market, which is completely decentralized and really couldn't care less what the SEC or Congress has to say about it. And the last thing I will say is that there will be fiat currencies that will collapse, like Venezuela. But I doubt it's going to be the US dollar itself that collapses.
Yeah, no, I think you made a great point there that I want to emphasize, and because I wanted to say it as well. And I think this is where your passion for Bitcoin is right now, as opposed to gold, and for me as well. Bitcoin is more a currency of the people. It's more of a grassroots populist currency versus gold, and it always will be. And there's two main reasons we need to emphasize for that. Number one, as I said, the players that own all the gold, or most of the gold, and will continue to, with you see Russia and China, are either central banks, governments, or authoritarian states. And China is as authoritarian and getting worse as you get. So you'd be putting in your lot sort of with those players by owning gold, right? The average person is not going to own, or not just the average person, but it's very different. The way Bitcoin came about and who owned it, and your potential to own it even now for the little person to build a decent position is very different than gold. And so gold is where the nation states are playing, right? Gold is where the old dominant institutions are trying to dominate: central banks, governments, authoritarian states, etc. So,
except unfortunately, it's been diluted so much by the paper market, it doesn't have the same impact it once had.
Right, but the point being is that this is what the sort of, at the level of nation state, gold is the tool that's being used, right? To make a power play in the case of Russia and China. If humanity is going to make a power play for decentralization and freedom and voluntarism, Bitcoin is your play. Bitcoin. So that's why we're focused on Bitcoin, because that's really where you can change the paradigm. Because again, people like to say, "Oh, gold-backed crypto." It's like, what is wrong with you? I mean, how do you not understand that if you send me gold over the internet, you're not sending me gold. You're sending me a claim to gold, okay? It's very different. When you send me Bitcoin, you're sending me Bitcoin. That's it. There's no claim. There's no third party. There's no counterparty risk. So those are very different things. And people who want power and centralized power way prefer gold to Bitcoin, and always will, because you can't send actual physical gold over the internet.
Right. Well, it's funny you brought up gold-backed crypto, and I just wrote an article about it the other day, and I said it's the last bastion of last vestige of gold bugs that are desperate to try to kind of be involved in the crypto revolution. Right. It's an oxymoron. There's no such thing. You can't back. First of all, you can't back a decentralized product like gold with a gold thing, because you'd need a third party, and that defeats the whole purpose. And second of all, I mean, if anyone needs backing, it's gold that needs backing by Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is becoming more desirable. But that's another story. The gold-backed crypto is kind of like the unicorn.
It's important to understand.
Yeah. Yes.
Because in an online world, Bitcoin actually does empower the individual sitting home in front of their computer, whereas gold does not do that. And it never can. It never, ever, ever can. It's a worst-case insurance hedge, right? Because or because maybe the global, right, like the global elites will, you know, when they're trying to create their new centralized bureaucratic monetary system, which I'm sure they will, yeah, maybe they'll like to make gold at the center of it. But that doesn't change the bigger picture, which is that for humans, individual humans, sovereign humans, Bitcoin is a far more powerful tool than gold ever will be.
Right. I now call gold an inflation-adjusted savings account with a call option on crisis. But to what you're talking about here, exactly. Look, people have always called silver poor man's gold, because really you can't afford gold if you're poor. Right. So people like to buy silver and say, well, I can afford more of it because I don't have as much money, and therefore no. But it's because it's worth less because it doesn't have the monetary value. And in this new world where you can buy Bitcoin, I don't care if it's $10,000 an ounce, you can buy 0.000001. I mean, you could buy $2 worth. You can't even do that with silver, with junk silver. I mean, Bitcoin is far more fractionalized than silver will ever be, and of course, gold. So to me, the whole argument for silver as poor man's gold, it doesn't even work. And again, you have a record high gold-silver ratio now. I don't think anyone cares about silver anymore, other than in industrial purposes. And yes, if you had a giant financial or political crisis, it would go up, but I guarantee you it would not do as well as gold or Bitcoin.
Well, I just want to jump in just real quick. So there's a lot of people listening who probably aren't that in tune with finance markets, as you said, but it's an important thing to say that I do actually think precious metals will do well. But again, in relation to the financial system as a whole. So the trade here, for people to understand more deeply, is not gold or silver as money, right, in a digital world. It doesn't even make sense. But an overall commodities trade. So if you think US dollar is going to lose influence on the global stage as part of the system, because right now the USD is like 80% of financial transactions globally and 22% of the economy is the US economy. It's totally unbalanced. So if that kind of balances out, commodities priced in US dollars will do much better than financial assets. And so gold and silver will ride that wave. And I think that's where we're going. That's like a late cycle trade as well. So I think commodities in general will do well versus financial assets in the years.
And of course, the big pink elephant of money printing. It is a Ponzi scheme, fiat currency. That's why debt is exploding, and the QE and the NERP and the ZERP haven't stopped. And believe me, if the 10-year rate goes over 3%, it's almost there. Guess what? The Fed will come in and start lowering rates again, and that's more money printing and more inflation. So yes, it's good for commodities. It will certainly be good for gold relative to commodities. But to me, the bigger issue is what we're talking about, the paradigm change of the world, where gold is an old world thing, old men in rooms, that are discussing the world versus new generations of millions of people in the digital age. And that's where the real excitement comes. So I'm going to ask you one last question. I mean, it could be a short answer or a long answer. And it's, look, the biggest picture question of all. People want to get some kind of thought of where you're viewing 2018. When we get to the end of 2018, and there's so many potential things that could happen, what do you think the biggest Bitcoin stories or cryptocurrency stories will have been for 2018?
Well, I hope, I'll tell you what I hope happens, right? I hope Lightning exceeds all expectations. I hope that we start to see applications more coming up that, like I said, with the Twitter, direct message, stuff like that, where that would add huge utility to my life. If I could say, okay, I'll respond to this direct message and get paid $5 in Bitcoin for doing so, right? I mean, something like that. So I would love to see that sort of thing where Bitcoin integration is sort of infects the daily life of some of us early adopters and things, and you have one of those aha moments. Like, so for example, the last aha moment that I had where I was just like, oh, wow, this is going to change the world, holy shit, was Bitcoin, right? That was the last time where I really was blown, my mind was blown. Before that, I remember what it was. It was the iPhone. My colleague on my desk had an iPhone before anyone else. And I looked at it, and I checked out the browser, and I saw how you could browse the internet on that phone, and I bought Apple stock that day. right? Because it was just like, whoa. So I want to see that whoa moment again in Bitcoin. And I think it can happen. And when it does, it's going to be just so unstoppable and such an unstoppable force for good in humanity. So that's, as far as Bitcoin is concerned, that's what I'd love to see. I think that would be hugely important, the spark moment, because when that happens, it's not just going to be you and me. It's going to be millions, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world finally getting it, right? That light bulb moment. So I'd love to see another light bulb moment in Bitcoin. I don't know if it's going to be 2018, but I feel like it's coming, and that's going to be very exciting. As far as just other stuff for the year, for me, is Trump going to try to pick a fight with Iran now? Big deal. This is a big thing. And again, it's all connected. I know a lot of Bitcoiners don't like to pay attention to politics or geopolitics, but trust me, it's all related. Everything is connected. And it's about governments losing credibility. And it's about the U.S. government using credibility, because let's be honest, what the U.S. just did with these strikes on Syria, we're acting like a rogue state right now. And the rest of the world is getting that. And that has huge implications for everything, currency, et cetera. And it seems clear to me that the people Trump is appointing, like John Bolton in particular, really do want to start this fight with Iran. And if things start to heat up there, it's going to start to get very chaotic very fast, as the whole world basically starts to see the United States as a rogue nation. I hope it doesn't happen. I really do. And that's why I write, because I don't want it to happen. But it looks concerning. And then finally, I think by the end of this year, if we do, maybe we should do it in December, do another podcast. I'm sure we'll do one in between now and then anyway. But I think it'll be very clear that the global economy is also rolling over by the end of this year. So there are a lot of things that are going to be happening, I think, between now and the end of 2018. But look, it's not doom porn thing. I am so optimistic about the future, precisely because of the fact that I think the farce of government, nation states, and the financial system is being exposed. And let's keep exposing it, because it is a farce.
Right. I mean, I was as unoptimistic about the future as I could be before Bitcoin, because I said, yes, it's great. Gold could go up in a crisis, but it's not going to be a good world when it does. Whereas if there's a crisis now, I think the world can transition to a better world quicker, which without crisis or without the same kind of crisis. So yeah, I'm optimistic too. But like you said, the U.S. government right now, they support the U.S. dollar, which is the primary competitor of Bitcoin, of gold, of everything. And it's not in good shape. I mean, you're talking about Iran. I'm thinking, well, what about North Korea? What about Russia? What about China and our trade wars and our NAFTA wars? I mean, we are acting like a rogue state in many ways, and we just don't have the cards to play anymore. Exactly. We're no longer the most powerful, unstoppable army. We have the most debt in the world. We don't manufacture anything anymore. We become a social pariah. And now, because of Bitcoin, there is an alternative, and gold, if the Russians and Chinese want to make a power play with it. So again, the confidence in the U.S. dollar as the dominant currency. I mean, look, there's a lot of countries in the world right now that are embracing Bitcoin for the reason that they can actually move up the hierarchy in the world in a way they never could in the U.S. denominated world. So I agree with you. I'm not sure if it's one event or a series of events, but anything that chips away at that U.S. empire, and according to what you're writing, many things are going to be chipping away at it imminently. Makes for the opportunity for this new world that Bitcoin gives us the opportunity to have come closer and sooner. So unless you have any last comments, Mike?
No, that's really it. I mean, great points. And I think what you just said there is key for people to understand, because it really is important, because it'll affect everything. The U.S. really is kind of bluffing. I mean, we just don't have, as you say, there's this projection that we're almighty and powerful. But if you look just slightly under the surface, the U.S. is just like this nuclear armed banana republic. Like it's really not good. And you can see it with the population. People are pissed. Even Trump supporters, a lot of Trump supporters were against the strike, and very vocally so. And the media is freaking out now because people aren't buying their narratives, because they're just lying. So so that's it. The world's going to change. Like I said, decades and weeks at some point. We're going to have lots of weeks where decades happen. And between now and 2025, so just get ready, embrace Bitcoin, embrace the positive change, the paradigm change. It's coming. Be positive, be optimistic, make this world a better place. And finally, I'm at Liberty Blitz on Twitter. I'm doing more on Twitter than even on my blog now, because I find that people really engage on Twitter, and it's a great platform for me to get across my thoughts. So I do it a lot there. And then my blog, libertyblitzkrieg.com, longer pieces, my 3-part series. Well, it's going to be a 4-part series, actually. I'll finish it up next week. But I think it's a must read. So check it out, guys. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I too have been doing a lot more on Twitter than the blog. I think you're just reaching more people. It's pretty obvious. And, like you said, in a world where things can and will change dramatically in short periods of time, why anyone would not just hodl their Bitcoin is beyond me. And so again, when you see me out there fighting against the TA and the trading, I mean, anyone who's listening to it, that we're going to crash has missed not only a big rally, but an opportunity to be around when one of those decades change in a week, because that will happen in a world that's becoming as unstable as it is right now. And of course, then you throw in the fact that Bitcoin is, well, probably the best invention of our lifetime. The only comparisons I can think of in modern times, or even semi-modern times, are the harnessing of electricity, the invention of the computer chip, and the internet itself. That's the level of importance that Bitcoin's going to have. So with that, we're going to conclude today's podcast featuring Mike Krieger of libertyblitzkrieg.com and at Liberty Blitz. I hope that you will all come out, if you're anywhere near Denver, to our amazing World Crypto Network event on April 25th. That's Wednesday. Just go to Rocky Mountain Blockchain or Boulder Blockchain, and you'll see the link to buy the tickets. And as for me, I'm at cryptogoldcentral.com. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week and a great crypto day.